Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, please. I could have a roll call to my left.
Brad Valentine.
Kyle Icorn.
Tim Pritchard
Carol Hannah.
and Stephanie, could you hit the internet?
Yep, Drew Holloway's here. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person, guys.
That's fine,
That's
Drew.
all right.
And then Jenny's not here at all,
No.
nor is Cheryl at all. Okay,
And then Jeff Rams.
Jeff's online. All right.
Yes.
You could review the minutes from the April meeting. Looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second it.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the April minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Drew. Those opposed? None. Okay. Whole business, as we left it last time, we talked about the quadrant plan. Particularly the southwest quadrant. And hashed around,
Yeah, if you want to pull up the one from last month.
Is
yeah,
they're not a presentation?
No, this was just kind of
we're just talking.
exactly what we did last time. So Steph will pull up just a visual of the map, but I kind of just wanted to circle back around if there was any.
We'd hashed about that southwest quadrant as far as renaming it, not renaming it, is it the right name? What name should be there, et cetera, with regards to the current residential label.
Yeah, I think it was more looking at, do we need to add additional language to the I-69 plan specifically in that quadrant, adding different types of housing styles. That was, it sounds like discussed to be in there beforehand. And it just kind of singled out that executive style, single family housing. And that's the only thing it's written to for that quadrant in particular. So I do think it would be wise to have maybe a consultant hired to just go over the market study portion of this and see if that is still something that should be added. I doubt their opinion would be any different because we don't have a super diverse housing stock right now. And I think this plan was geared a little bit to add some to that. So I just wanted to see if you guys had any other additional comments, let you know kind of what I plan on doing next. And then I am not sure the bodies this would have to go through to be amended, since this is a plan RDC put together. So I imagine it would go before them first, and then either you guys and then town council, or just town council. I'm not exactly sure the process on this particular plan.
With the pushback that Craig had from the RDC, it might be a good idea to have that consultant give us an opinion.
Yeah,
It might help convince them to relabel it.
Well, it was pretty clear to me after listening to all the people that were very much involved with that what they intended that quadrant to be and what actually got into the plan sounded like two different things.
like it was
Yeah,
missing.
they
like
intended
this.
the transition, you know.
Yeah.
They
yeah,
got pretty stubborn as far as making change.
Yeah, but he was pretty clear that what he thought, what he thought it was gonna be and what the verbiage really is not in line with what
Correct,
it seemed like,
Yeah.
all of the focus groups and all of the
right. And
all the
market
steering
study.
committees and everything
Yeah.
came up with, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you can,
There's someone
add
similar
to
to
the
Kim,
language.
I'm sorry,
no.
someone similar to Kimley Horn.
I mean, we could utilize Kimberly Hort again, or we can reach out
Let's do
and see,
somebody different.
and see if, we can. There's a lot.
There's gotta be a half
Yeah.
dozen.
Different varieties of firms that kind of do stuff just like this.
How do we go through a selection process on that? Because,
Or just banning.
lots of
since-
people hang,
No.
shingles out. You get a set of credentials, you hang out a shingle, and suddenly, you're a subject matter expert, you're a consultant. I've got 50 friends who have retired or transitioned out of full-time professional life that have all hung consulting shingles. You know, some have law degrees, some are, you know, AICPA members, they're
Sure.
accountants.
Yeah.
And, you know, how do you select the best, most viable for an I-69 corridor community that is going to have the same growth pressures that 82nd Street had, 96th Street had, 116, 37 split, walking your way north, so that it's just not an academic exercise, but it's a combination of academic research and a solid background
Mhm.
behind their recommendations.
Well, I know, I mean, I haven't really been here to hire a consultant, but I can tell you what I would expect would be a portfolio that reflects instances or plans like this. A reputable name possibly.
Can we put out an RFP and let's look at it?
I don't know. I don't really see why you couldn't, but I don't know if that's
Jeff,
a
are you online?
process that the planning commission can.
I
do.
am.
Town has to do
How,
it.
how can we approach that, Jeff, to get some RFPs or some resumes in here?
We could certainly authorize those advertisements to be sent out.
So when it comes, so Jeff, this would be looking for a consultant to reanalyze the I-69 plan for, at least in particular, the market study portion of it. So then would planning commission become the body that selects that person, or would it still be town administration?
Well, it depends on who'd be writing the check, obviously. But if it's the, if,
Have the money.
Well,
yeah,
we'll pay that out of our
We're
salary.
gonna get paid.
well, one entity that might be able to swing it is the redevelopment commission. This clearly fits within redevelopment.
Right, right.
And the TIF funds could be used to pay for that if they're available. And I'd have to look at the numbers on that and get with Willie's office, and obviously the redevelopment commission would have to agree, but that makes a lot of sense to me, just thinking about it here a little bit off the top.
Yeah,
I don't want somebody that's gonna come in and recreate all
no,
this stuff, if they could use the information that
It's
is
not that old,
available
yeah.
and
Well, like
not,
Brad said, how do we know it's the right person?
yeah.
Let's,
no,
Because I'm just looking at it as, we got one shot at it.
right.
mhm,
And it's kind of like, you know, as you look at that, you know, somewhat conservative approach, it's not something you can wing, build, and scrape in my lifetime in all probability. And it's so critical in setting the tone for the community
mhm,
that, you know, I want to make sure that we
absolutely.
do it right.
Yeah, yeah. I would also like to kind of delve into and try to find where some of that stuff seemed to got lost in translation with things that, at least just in this particular quadrant, I'm happy to do kind of an assessment of other things and outline this and see if other things might be missing from here, where that might be included in that consultant's work. But in particular, you know, this only speaks to a certain type of housing, but it sounds to me like originally that was not supposed to be there. So there at least is some kind of logic behind that, just going forward, that this is what was planned for here. This is what the people of the steering committee saw would be the
Yeah,
best
do we have,
use.
do we have steering committee minutes or draft plans that we can compare? to
Draft
see?
plans, yes. I don't believe steering committees keep minutes.
Or there's any record or notes?
I can look in the project files, and, you know, there might have been steering committee discussions at RDC, since they were the first body to review this. So I could look in RDC minutes and see if anything like that ever came up.
Jeff, what do you need from this board, or do you need anything to get the RFP proposal out of the paper?
Generally, a vote to issue it. I would say that if we have somebody in mind, or if we know someone that would know a guy, so to speak, these would not have to go through the publication process because they're a service. And with service contracts, you don't have to go through public bidding.
Yeah, and we use
Um,
our money, not public funds. or federal funds, excuse me.
I guess we don't know who those people are.
We could make a vote tonight to direct Hannah and myself to find a
List.
consultant and including issuing an RFP if necessary.
Would this be
Can-
something the RDC needs to approve first before we go and put out any sort of consultant thing?
Yeah, we would need money. Of course, we're asking for proposals is what we'll do. And, you know, if the proposals come back and it's insanely expensive, then we don't have to accept any of them.
Okay,
But, so I don't think we need the money necessarily in place today.
okay, okay.
Well, and you hit the key, proposals plural. I would really like to see us look at
Multiple.
Very
more than the
Yeah.
same people we go to every time,
Exactly.
to really see what is out there, what their credentials are, what their, like you say, what their portfolios look like, what their experience set is.
This would
Do
be-
any of these, sorry, do any of these consultants ever talk with like the potentially, I'm just thinking, so we don't have a packed house if someone doesn't agree with the type of housing that might be allowed for a vote. Do any of these consultants ever go talk to, say, the people that live in Foster Branch or like Mystic Waters or Case or any of those type of people?
No, I mean, when plans are put together, since they're affecting, the locality pretty much as a whole, it's just advertised in, newspapers, social medias, by the steering committees, the public hearings on the rough drafts and things of that nature, open houses. But direct contact with property owners is just not like a super feasible,
Yeah.
Thing, unless we're, looking to go work with a developer on a property, like the Keystone District might be something where we engage the property owner. Once
Okay.
we have a really well set plan to kind of work together to coach someone essentially.
But we have done some community interactive forums
Correct,
Okay.
process.
yes,
So it,
open house.
right.
Okay, cool. I was just, after coming in guns blazing with my first meeting and
Yeah.
having the LKQ, I want to make sure that, if there is, make sure we cross all of our Ts and dot our Is.
Absolutely.
So can I follow up on this? Because I've been losing sleep since our April meeting.
Oh, goodness.
We know we're gonna have growth. We know where we are today,
Sure.
and we see steps at 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. In all the studies we have done, I've never really seen what I would call the community planning matrix that says when a community hits 10,000 residents, here are the basic amenities that you need to support them. We talked a lot about the fact that you have the east and west side of I-69, where, at some point in time, you're probably going to need expansion of the fire district and potentially a second firehouse on that side. The schools are going to have to overlay and potentially build, expand, make a decision, neighborhood versus centralized separate piece, but it's part of that overall plan.
Mhm.
When we're trying to identify what the community is going to need, I have to think that there is a basic tier of amenities and support services that would be needed as we achieve each one of those goals
We like that.
from the growth.
And support services.
It's just like we were having the discussion the other night afterwards. What is the community missing today? Missing another pharmacy. We have no pharmacy on the west side of the community.
Mhm.
The one we have is on the far east side. We have no competition in the pharmacy market. We have no real full service, large scale grocery store
Mhm.
in the community. So as the community grows and we outgrow what we have today, CVS here has a limited capacity on the number of prescriptions they can fill.
Mhm.
What else do we need when we hit 10, 15, 20? How do we blow that out so that when we want to think about maybe some commercial development on the south side of 38, ahead of the Keystone development,
Mhm.
we're putting things in that, A, the community needs, the basic amenities, support services, and B, things the community wants. And what I haven't really seen is that layered overlay that as we grow, here's what we need to be considering, here's what we need to be deploying geographically, it needs to be distributed, or it needs to be centralized. You know, perfect example is, long term, where does town hall stay? Does town hall stay here with limited number of square feet, taking up key retail space for development of the downtown community? Or does it move into a larger facility, like I think happened at Westfield? You look at things like the town garage, our pole barn monstrosity next to the cemetery. Long-term, are we going to maintain that? Or are we going to look for another area within the community for a larger expanded
Mhm.
facility?
Eminent domain, all the ground at the south of the garage. Expand the barn.
Tear down all the houses.
That's good. Especially in the historic homes.
But it can't be
They're
pole
all
barn
over the
materials. We don't allow that anymore, but no. I know, Brad, I think that's a really good point, and I think moving forward, that's something we could utilize.
And I think
Well,
it's,
a lot of those, go ahead.
I think it's an area that you can get community focus groups. I would be very curious to hear, you see some of it on chatter. I want a Starbucks, I want a Starbucks. But if you were to really look at the community and say, hey, what amenities do we need here as we grow
Mhm.
to keep you here, to spend your dollars here?
Right. Well, like-
Versus driving to Noblesville.
Yeah.
Hitting grocery store in Noblesville, doing your retail shopping, having dinner,
Mhm.
having lunch, hitting the big box store. Right now, we have nothing to keep people here. When we talked about, we don't even have a hardware store anymore.
No, I
So
think
it's
a
that's
lot of
a
that.
good point, and the Keystone District Development, I think that kind of plan that we had discussed in April, looking at that is really gonna help focus some of those things. As far as the things that we do need, like your point about the pharmacies and stuff, I think we can encourage certain things, but we need incentives for things like that, because we can't control what exactly comes in, especially if it's a generalized kind of commercial area. We can't say this must be a CVS or something like that, but if there were incentives available, perhaps, I don't know.
A lot of
Is
that
that
stuff-
legal?
A lot of that stuff's not to work backwards. In other words, we're gonna have to have the population before we get a 100,000 square foot Meyer store.
Mhm,
Because they're gonna do their research.
mhm.
If the census in here, they ain't coming.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, Needler's is struggling, it's for sale.
Okay.
The fire district is already expanded. We've formed a territory, we're taking over Ingles. They are looking at a new station out there. That happens basically just for lack of volunteerism.
Well,
there, but I don't think it's something, and I'm not arguing with you, Brad, and it's a perfect point. And I agree, but I don't think we can go out and build or attract a CVS, a Meyer store, a Starbucks. And 4 Outback Steakhouses. There's nobody to support them. Those people are smart.
But I think identifying what the community is going to need and at least having it on the roadmap is what you want to achieve.
Sure. I
Because the
think-
perfect example is,
Well, I
there's no
think that's-
pharmacy in Ingalls. There's no pharmacy in LaPel. There's no grocery store in Ingalls. Is there still a grocery store in LaPel or not?
No,
So, the west side of our community has the potential of anchoring residential development at the next intersection down, the intersection of 13 and 38, and draw northward, not only serving the
There's-
west side of the community, but also serving the neighboring communities to
Yeah.
bring business in.
to help support that, we've heard rumors from Fall Creek Regional Waste, they want to build a Meyer store on the northwest corner behind the old Stuckey's, the old truck stop.
It's not in our
But
jurisdiction.
It's not
but-
our jurisdiction, but I think they're waiting till they get enough homes down there in that area. And there's a boatload of homes down there already. CVS and Walgreens, though, you normally go right across the street one another.
Yeah, that's there.
What's this upcoming meeting that the town's gonna have about growth? Isn't there something coming up for
Mhm.
public input?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just kind of a completely Q&A session in regards to the first two, Pendleton's response to growth.
Is it gonna be interactive? Is it just
Yeah.
gonna be an open forum or?
Yeah, it'll just be.
Well, part of that's the merging Fall Creek Township with Pendleton Town.
Well, that's not the focus of it, but if it comes up, we're certainly happy to answer questions about it. But it's more so, the point of it was, people were worried about rapid growth and haphazard growth. And so it was to showcase all of the plans, ordinances, implements we have in place to assure that that doesn't happen. I've heard a lot of, we don't want to be fishers. So I don't know that example personally, but apparently it's not good or something.
So
But
with Brad's comment, do we go to future Keystone Development Area, put in Meyer, CVS, Starbucks, Applebee's?
that would all be
down-
part
down in
of,
a little box.
that would all be part of that Keystone Development Plan. I would imagine that,
Because if I was a developer in California, I wouldn't have a clue what Keystone Development District is.
right, which is why we're working with getting some people looking at
Well,
proposals
it's
for.
capped, I mean, it's halted until we hit a certain threshold anyway, right? In this plan,
Yes.
is
But
it 20,000 or?
I think it is 20,000, but I think when we go to
What
develop,
we do tomorrow, Simon come in and said, we're gonna build extra 10 there.
I guess we can't do it because we don't have 20%. I mean.
Bet we
Well-
find a way.
Yeah.
But again, we talked about what is the Pendleton community? And we define it by a geographic boundary that we have jurisdiction over. But when you look at the Pendleton community, it is really South Madison.
it's a
It
lot
is the
of
South
communities.
Madison School District. It is all the unincorporated areas of Madison County that's experiencing the heavy growth that either we pull in as a part of that extended community because families are coming to the Ball Diamond, going to the soccer fields, going to the elementary schools, the middle schools, the high schools, or we don't address a lot of that growth, which I think is taking place in the unincorporated county area, which is impacting us multiple ways.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I think a good place to start is honestly gonna be getting a more zoomed in development plan for that Keystone District. And also discussing the threshold of population for going out and trying to seek someone to develop that. Will
You know,
be part of that
Scott's always-
discussion.
Scott's always brought up the fact of not removing the town, scared to death that the town goes out there.
Well, I think
But
it,
we can't build a Meyer and a CVS down anywhere,
No,
or Applebee's,
and,
no,
Starbucks.
no.
and there has to
Where's this
be
gonna go?
distinctive reasons why someone would come here downtown and someone would go out there. They're
I
not
agree.
meant to be the same thing, have the same vibe, have the same
We'll have two different towns.
businesses.
One
Right.
thing,
Zionsville fought it forever.
Yeah,
They wanted to blow up their interchange out there forever, and they just, everything was no. For probably 15 years, they finally given in.
well, I think that,
but you look at it here, we're geographically constrained.
Oh, yeah, we're
We
lost.
have virtually no retail space
There's
available.
no development
We
downtown.
have no space for a larger full-scale restaurant. We always are able to shoehorn something in with limited space, limited kitchen space.
And no parking.
Parking's an issue, The other thing I'd like to see is an overlay map, and maybe we get the PBA involved with what do we actually have in downtown Pendleton that attracts people? If we're gonna make this a destination, what attracts people? Do corporate offices attract people? Do attorneys' offices attract people? do, you know. Personal care facilities attract people on a regular basis. What do we have and what are we missing? If we really want to maintain the integrity of downtown, make it a destination and, you know, have something going on out, you know, after 8 o'clock in the evening.
No, I completely agree. I think that's a whole other bag of badgers, but as far as the I-69 plan goes, I think moving forward with that Keystone development plan is gonna be kind of the first step in that. And I don't see any reason why that matrix that you're talking about could kind of be incorporated into that, you know, because a lot of these amenities that we will likely need as our population grows would come from this area. Maybe not just the Keystone, but that general area. So what I would like to do then is kind of do some background research with, maybe talk with Craig with RDC and see if I can find where some of this stuff might have gotten lost in translation. And then I will talk with Reski about the, you know, marketing assessment kind of plan for movement that we want to make on just reassessing this to see if it's still relative. And then move forward with, if amending, with RDC.
Do we want to go ahead and start the RFP process?
Yeah, I think we can,
Was the
Jeff.
I'll,
I think the motion was, or considering was to have staff
so what's it?
explore, and if an RFP becomes necessary, then authorize that. as
That's,
well.
yeah.
And then
that's-
But
have the staff,
start with, you know, some in-house work. maybe.
Right.
Wanna
Yeah.
Wait then. Go to the podium, please. Come to the podium. State your name and address.
Mike Bond, 6150 South Fox Court.
Thank you.
I think one of the things we talked about last week was how to stage the town coming in like 38 and how, and I don't know if this was part of this, where like the unique architecture, like we talked about at West Clay and Raleigh area. And I thought Scott had mentioned like 38 coming in to the east side and 67 and 9, so that if somebody would come in and build a grocery store on 9, if you have those architecture standards in place, right?
Yes.
Then you can say, we want it to look different. We want to look like this instead of what we got with the new buildings out there. I think they look nice, but we could have probably had something a lot nicer.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would be part of this too.
That would be part of the UDO,
Okay.
because that would be architecture standards. It would have an overlay. That kind of is a concentric circles out from downtown. The thing with that is, and I had mentioned this in the April meeting, is that it can be done, but we have to be really careful. It's a very fine line between a nice architecture standard and then monotonous and Disneyland look. So it can be done, but that's gonna be something we're really gonna have to find a good consultant to do that.
Because I'm not
Brad,
sure we
you're-
can make the whole, everything look like downtown. I don't. know
No,
if that-
it's not. I mean,
Yeah, I
to
don't know
Brad's
that-
point,
Yeah,
we don't have anywhere to build anything. Except out there.
Right.
yeah.
So kind of that, you
Unless
know,
we start
lead
knocking things
into
down.
your historic area, having a different type of architecture standard is not unheard of.
Mhm.
It's just we have to be careful on those kinds of restrictions so they don't look tacky.
Mhm.
And also the other thing is, you know, we haven't had a whole lot of things built with our new UDO. We've had the Three Rivers and we've had Kyle Smith's homes.
Mhm.
So it, you know, just looking at bulk of it, we don't really have a good example yet of what things can look like. But, you know, we do have some architecture standards we're gonna be reviewing this evening. If there are ideas or you think we should come together with the committee to kind of start to review that, that's fine. Or we can kind of just bring a consultant to the table to look at what we have and say, this is kind of what we're going for, but, you know, we want to make sure it doesn't look monotonous, you know. So there's a few ways you can go around it, but it's a fine line.
well, I think we already have monotony in what we're allowing to be constructed now. I mean, in
With
My-
regard to what,
my opinion,
which.
a lot of the developments,
Which ones? Because we've only had Kyle Smith and Three Rivers build.
I guess it would be prior standards.
Correct. So the new standards, we don't have a grasp on, kind of, we don't have a lot of variety to look at to say,
To see if
we
it's
like
working or
this,
not.
we don't like that. The
Yeah.
old standards I completely understand, but with our new standards, we don't have a pool yet. We can't really judge, in my opinion,
Whether it's working
how
or
they
not.
work or don't work.
The one comment with regards to the Keystone development,
Mhm.
I think that you need to do in parallel the downtown study so that you can address the preservation of downtown.
Okay,
As you look at the Keystone development,
okay.
doing that downtown matrix, how do we maintain and
Oh, the
continue to
matrix.
grow and
Okay.
enhance it as the Keystone development comes into play so that we don't have the mass migration,
Mhm.
that I'm not overly concerned about killing downtown, but
Mhm.
a lot of people are worried about it not being a destination.
Mhm.
We've never quite gotten to the point of being a destination yet, in my opinion, but
I imagine the people that are downtown, for the most part, will stay because they won't be able to afford rent out there. So then you go to a new development like that, you're talking $3,000-5,000 a month rent. To rent a Subway shop. Shotgun place. Trust me, there's nobody downtown paying to cut a rent.
And we do
Granted,
have
not in
a
parking, but
revitalization plan for downtown from 2015 that we're looking to do a partial amendment on for Pendleton Main Street. It's part of their certification process. But that might kind of speak to that, or the Keystone Development Plan could look at that and take those items that they have on their kind of action list and take that into consideration. I mean, we can definitely make
think the-
whoever.
biggest hurdle we're gonna have is gonna sneak up on us again.
Well, and that in and of itself was kind of a downtown revitalization tool, but that'll be up to town council to put in place or not, but that's a huge revitalization tool that a lot of
Because when-
places
when
have
something
used.
goes out there, they're gonna want liquor license. We don't have it.
Right, where that riverfront allows for those, and they're only allowed down here. So,
Foster's branches in the river.
I mean, I guess-
How wide out can
Right.
you?
Fortville got it down with that.
what's
ditch
the
that runs
flow
through there.
rate? It has to be, yeah, I'm not
Wow.
sure, but
But the other thing too, I think we have a lot of connections north-south, but nothing into town. Like we have a 2-lane road that backs up clear out to the roundabout.
mhm.
And so I don't know if there's some way to evaluate east-west movement.
Well,
try to-
we've looked at all that. We got an interstate, a railroad, a prison, and a creek.
Well, I mean,
Really?
we've got a street that dead ends in Fall Creek down there where that old bridge is set. The town owns all that land.
That's trail.
It could be a road. I
You
mean, look,
wanted to go
do you
into
see what-
Taylor
do you see what
Street.
Noblesville's done? They've,
You're gonna dump everybody out on Tile Street?
well, I mean, you gotta put them somewhere. I mean, Tile Street's not a good spot, but there's just.
I
don't
would,
know, just-
I would argue that once, the North Heritage Way route or extension is going to be built before
If that could ever
anything
get up to
else.
600,
Huh?
if that could get to 600,
Right, so funneling people off so that they don't necessarily have to go
Yeah.
clog up downtown. That is gonna be an essential piece, and that's gonna be built before anything else. I would
And
say the
Heritage Way
next.
south would get to Fall Creek Drive. I guess.
I would say that would be the second kind of progression of projects built. And then lastly would be the 67th Street extension, and that's gonna not get going until the Keystone gets going.
so do we in essence have 3 commercial development areas? We have everything that develops on 967, 36, 38 splits off of that.
Yes.
Everything over there.
Okay.
We have no real active development here. We might have in downtown some revitalization
Sure.
and the ability to maximize the space that we have. We've got the Keystone District. We have quality residential housing. And we have the far west side of the community,
Mhm.
which is accessible to 13, 38, LaPel, unincorporated Madison County. Is that the third district?
I was, just in my assessment, I would say that a large portion of that is gonna just develop as housing. I would say that's almost where your executive style housing would fit a little better, except up close, the one, couple of parcels we have abutting 13 where our jurisdiction ends would likely be a heavier use with commercial, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a district. I don't think it'll necessarily be something people, visit every day, like how we currently have on 67, 36, 38, that general area, or the Keystone. Might be a little heavier, not industrial, but boat storage, boat sales, things of,
I guess I was just looking at it from a perspective that if a Meyer does go in at the southwest corner of 38 and 13 to basically pull in LaPel and all the unincorporated Madison County quick growth coming up 13, that kind of is an anchor. And, we're putting in, we approved boat storage out there and some other commercial. You've got Newco, which is, backing up as a neighbor,
yeah,
which is going to impact what is developed immediately behind that. So I just like, is there the ability to leverage that intersection of 13 and 38 for some targeted commercial development that supports the community?
I mean, it certainly could. I believe our comp plan states that area is supposed to have commercial style development. Kyle, you might remember that a little bit better than I do. Out on 13, because there is such a limited amount of jurisdictional ground there.
Yeah, 13 and 38, we don't have jurisdiction, that four-way stop, right?
No, it's
13
coming-
and 700.
Along the interstate.
Yeah, along
It's
the
just
interstate.
north of
yeah.
It goes south of it.
You have to come east on 38 to get into our jurisdiction.
So,
But we,
Brad, are you trying to say if Meyer wanted to build a Pendleton jurisdiction at 13 and 69, you want to twist your arm to build here?
I guess that's one of the questions. If they land it there, does that become an anchor?
Let's just say they want to build at Pendleton. Pendleton's zone,
So next to Indy Boat Co.
yes,
I'm just, real,
which we have jurisdiction over.
correct.
We want to twist their arm to build it to Keystone District.
I mean, that was one of the things I brought up with Scott. Are there some developments that we want to anchor in here that we want to pursue and recruit? We have a different philosophy. He is wait and just let it happen over time.
Mhm.
But, from my perspective, in my business life, we have missed too many opportunities by not being proactive. So, there's a level of proactiveness, not growth for the sake of growth, but being
Yeah.
proactive and targeting what we need and what we want
I think
and
that
pursuing it.
that Keystone District plan we're looking at is gonna be a document that we can then take to people that we want and say, build in here. It also might include incentives at some point, because that's another thing we're currently lacking is we don't have incentives for people to come here, but I think at least when it comes to Resky and myself, we're a good mix of yin and yang, whereas I think a little bit more that way and he's a little more conservative. And I think together we can probably come to a really good middle ground when it comes to things like that, so that we don't lose out on other opportunities.
The perfect example is, I'm glad to hear that there's a community facility that's being discussed here for the
Mhm.
medical arts growth here versus the intersection of 13
Mhm.
outside of our jurisdiction,
Mhm.
because it augments what we've targeted for that southeast quadrant.
Yeah.
It expands what we have already here, where we have limited facilities, limited capacities in their existing facility. And, it's essential for a growing community.
Absolutely.
So that's great news from my opinion.
When Exit 10 was developed, they did that whole thing. They all developed on paper. They actually had Cabela's anchored in there already. That was all top secrets. And Cabela's had committed,
Mhm.
but not to the well built. It was double top secret, all people know.
Okay, so
Let's move
I'm
forward.
gonna do some background research. I will get moving on, looking at consultants, maybe putting a list together. I think I hear what Jeff is saying, and that since this isn't using state funding, I don't think we need an RFP, but we can definitely just
Yeah.
put feelers out. We don't have to go through an official
idea.
process, so.
But I think when you put the feelers out, make sure that they understand, we'd really like to see a portfolio of their work.
Oh,
and-
absolutely. We can kind of put please submit this,
Yeah.
this and this, portfolio, resume, cover letter. So, okay, I will move forward on that. Any kind of last thoughts, anything I'm missing, anything you want me to add to my to-do list with in regards to the I-69 plan?
Have we heard anything from the Shane's, what's that name, the northeast corner? Much like
Carney,
the Carney
Sheree?
tree.
Yeah, they're, well, they had a potential development there that backed out because they didn't want to conform to our development standards for access. So, okay.
Going back to the
Those
new,
gas station.
going back to the new standards, is the new restaurant on the north side of 38 under the guidelines of our new standards?
The Wolfies?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really beautiful, beautiful building, at least on paper. All right, so next I've got some amendments. So if you want to follow along on your iPads, the first one is something that we had carried over from the last round of amendments. We have microbrewery as a listed permitted use in a couple of zones, but there's no definition for it. We have a definition for regular brewery. So I just kind of Googled, and the most consistent thing I could find was small, limited quantity, high quality or exotic beers or ales, and produces less than 15,000 barrels of product. Majority product sold for consumption on premises. So that's kind of what I put together. If it's a permitted use and it's not blatantly obvious, we should probably have a definition for it, so.
But it looks like they can't sell, right? It's sell
Correct.
Most
Yeah.
product.
Yeah,
So that means we can only sell 49% off. 51% has to be sold
has to be sold on
for
site.
consumption on the premises.
Yeah. I don't know. And the whole 15,000 barrels of product. I have no idea how to really, like, I guess I could put it
That
on
seems like a boatload.
a permit application. I don't know if
sounds
that's
like
a
a
lot, if
definition.
it's a little.
Definitions.
Yeah. Do,
Well, and
do we
the,
have microbreweries that we could find out how much they make?
I'm sure there's some around in
Around.
There are probably a
Indianapolis.
dozen of them in
Yeah.
the Indianapolis metro area.
Hamilton County.
I would think Sun King would be a good choice because I know they have their main facility right downtown, but then they have a few satellite facilities that have like smaller batch stuff. That might be one to look into.
Yeah.
And the ATC also has a definition for a small brewer permit that has a gallon. I don't know what it is. I tried to find out for the meeting. I wasn't able to find it real quick, but that is it's a 210-1 permit. And I know there's a gallon restriction on that is
Okay.
small brewery is what the ATC kind of is calling a microbrewery, I believe.
Oh, okay. So I mean, and I guess that too would also depend on how many the town license wise has available or how that's permitted, because I'm sure it's like liquor where it's by population. Right, Jeff? I would imagine it is at least getting a license to brew beer.
It is, although there's different numbers of all different kinds of licenses. There's a certain number of 3 ways and there's more than that on 2 ways. And
Gotcha.
things of that nature.
So I mean, if you want, we can hold this one off again if you want to do more research or put this into place, and any sort of issues come up with it, readdress it.
I would
We
put
haven't-
it into place, do more research and then amend it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I agree.
Okay, all right, well then I will do that, and just do some additional research on that, maybe reference that specific brewer license, number, that it's only valid for these kinds of licenses, because they're considered small by the state standards. Next, I have mural signage. So the HPC is working on updating their design guidelines, for the local historic district. And something I had brought up was that downtown business, well, all of our business districts restrict mural signage. That's not art. So over on the laundromat, that's considered art. It doesn't have a commercial message. We can't regulate that. It's by the property owner. But HPC recommended an amendment to this body to allow mural signage in their locality, which is the downtown business zoning, because of its historic nature. So this would be different than restoring like the sign on the JT Chambers building. That would be considered historic or art. It would follow different guidelines. But for someone who wants to use mural signage on their building as their commercial signage, so like Hayden's, for example, if John Oliver is planning on removing that, but if the potential new tenant would like a sign that reflects what Hayden's was, they listed these 4 standards that they would like to see for that. So size would be determined by them. This would all go through their COA process. The only thing is that would be different than perhaps an art style renovation would be they do not want paint directly on the building. It's kind of a vinyl wrapping or a canvas wrap. We have one on the back of our building, the Pendleton mural that's out there on the side of Town Hall. Can't have any EVMS, so no blinking lights as part of it. And it has to be on the primary structure, which is not an issue down here. There's not a lot of accessory structures at all.
Do we need to put in there that it has to be maintained?
Well, that would probably fall under our nuisance ordinances for maintenance, things of that, like that nature. So we already have that in place. That's under the building code.
So this vinyl or canvas material, it's not like a loose sign, it's just hung on the building.
No. It's like the one on the
Right,
side of our
right.
building. It's wrapped onto it with heat, I believe is the component that's
So it
used.
conforms to the building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there really aren't so many places that downtown that don't even do that. I mean,
There's not, but there's a few. So like the Hayden's building is one
Yeah,
of
Willis
yeah.
Road.
yeah, well,
and the
If there's
JT
a
Chambers
Willis Road,
building.
they'll figure it
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And it does have to go through HPC.
HPC, yeah.
They're kind of the finalizing body on that, but
Yeah.
opening that opportunity so people can bring back that historic look.
Yeah.
Does it have to be historic?
It has to be in the historic district.
Is the
HPC
commercial
will decide.
development going in down here with the bank and all the new,
The where the
Building.
depot shoppies was.
right?
No, that's not a historic building, but
But
they
is it in
could,
the historic district?
correct,
So could they use a wall mural on that structure
yes,
within the historic district?
with HPC approval. Yes.
I say as long as HPC is approving it.
Mhm.
Agreed.
Because their design guidelines are guidelines, because they do need to have a little bit more flexibility. This is more of a shall document. That's a should document. So kind of at least putting this in there to have some legs. So, okay, anything on that one? We're good to go on that one?
That's good.
Good,
Sure.
okay. Andrew, any thoughts on that one?
Oh, this sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. All right, the next one is a Hannah Rose mess up. So I had us amend in October of last year to add multifamily to primary and secondary platting processes instead of going through site plan review. The way that I interpreted the UDO was the major subdivisions include multifamily and in both of its designations. However, I think that that was put there, so if someone has 100 acres and they split it into 20 acres of multifamily, 20 acres of single family, et cetera, et cetera. But multifamily is more of a commercial use when you think about it. It's not subdivided. There's one ownership or a conglomerate of ownerships for one parcel. So nothing is platted. So it therefore would not go through platting process. So the UDO did have that correctly in language, correct terminology. So I would just like to amend it back to the original, which says the development or this is for needing a site plan review. The development or modification of property for uses other than ag, single family or two family require development plan approval. So that was an oopsie on my end, but I had misinterpreted exactly what a multifamily subdivision meant. But if there's nothing to record, it can't exactly go through secondary platting. There are no plots. So this body would see the rezone, from ag to multifamily, and then it would just go through site plan development. So it would go through all of our, let's see, engineer, water, street, electric, storm, sanitary, go through that entire process. And if there were things that you wanted to see or had concerns in the development, that would be conditions with the rezone process.
So I'm looking at the definition of multifamily.
Mhm.
So what if you have a triplex or a quadplex building
Under one ownership,
individually owned? So those could be fee simple down, each unit could be owned separately, so that would be considered multifamily.
and that would just be the walls, not the property, like a condo.
Well, the property could go through the wall, just like a duplex.
Yeah.
Each side of a duplex is owned by a different person.
Right, and they
You
have
can
their own
3 and
parcel.
4plexes the same way.
Yeah,
But our definition of multifamily says a dwelling unit designed for 3 or more, or a dwelling designed for 3 or more dwelling units.
mhm.
So it's kind of weird. So where would a
Yeah.
triplex fit in? You would want that plat.
Right, because it would be a plot. Maybe it would
And the
be that
same
the
with-
zoning would be different.
One that says dwelling 2 family is a dwelling on a single parcel containing 2 dwelling units. So what if you have a duplex that is owned separately, then it's not a 2-family dwelling.
Then maybe we should look at.
So I think we should look at all the definitions of dwellings. And I looked at Westfield, Fishers, a few different ones, and they all were
Yes.
a little different. But maybe just kind of consider.
Yeah.
Making those. a little-
So if we kind of clarify those, though, do you agree, though, that if it is like an apartment complex, it
Yeah.
clearly would not go through plat?
If it's a building with,
Yeah.
multiple units under the same ownership,
Right,
it doesn't have public streets,
yes,
then yes, it would just be site
site
plan.
plan
Yeah.
review, okay. And that's what I think this was saying.
And that makes sense. It's just the definitions are a little
Yeah.
squirrely.
Yeah. So, do you want me to amend that back to disinclude multifamily and then work on some dwelling definitions, or wait until we kind of have everything together and then do it all at once? I don't have any multifamily on the horizon, but, just kind of looking ahead.
Let's wait and do it all at once when we do
Okay.
the micro brewery.
That works. Get it all cleaned up.
Okay, so I will hold off on that multifamily development process and get some better definitions for clarity. Okay. Okay, next, Drive It. So Drive It is an EIFS material. So Tim, you might be able to explain this better than I can. To me, it's just a faux finish that works to double to insulate. It can look like brick, it can look like stone, it can look like stucco. It can be
That's a
shaped
good-
to form.
See straight across the street above the boutique there, or flower store, not the brick. That can be considered ephes. Normally, modern day ephes is smooth, or they'll trowel a line in it. Or it can have a little bit of a textury popcorny look. They don't normally do that knockdown stucco look anymore.
Mhm.
With new ethos.
So
I
EFS
think
stands for
Needler's
external
has ethos on the
insulation
very top
finishing systems.
up there. Where that canopy used to be, they let the canopy rot away, blow away.
Some of the ethos is rotting and falling off too.
What happens, it gets moisture intrusion behind everything else, pops it off.
So you're just redefining from a name brand to a.
Yeah, so this is like saying we don't allow Kleenex or Q-tips. It's calling out the product and not, or the brand and not the product.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd like to just change it to EIFS, the EFS. So that way we're not,
And then is that added to the definitions? So then I would EIFS.
I can add one.
It may be obvious to a person, but
No,
while
that's
you're
good.
doing definition.
I will
Good
Get
call,
one
'cause I
added.
didn't know what it was.
for that. And then the downtown business, and I printed this out for you. This will be one of the next things we look at. Allows up to 20%. So I'll just, it says right now on the table, it's completely prohibited, but I can just change that to 20% max. And that is determined by HPC. So
That's
it's
a
downtown business.
very common architectural building facade today.
Mhm.
Very common.
So it's allowable in our residential districts for the most part, but as far as business districts is where it's restricted.
So you're just gonna put allowable with like an asterisk or something?
I'll just put 20% max
Okay.
there. See section A of yada yada.
Is Citizens Bank going back?
Citizens Bank.
Right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, they are using mostly wood, stone, and glass. They have their
Okay.
mock-up out there. It's really nice. HPC loved that, approved it. Anywho, so major subdivision standards is my last one here. So we are missing a density standard for SF4 zoning for their multifamily component. So
5.3, is that right?
yes. So there are some single family districts that allow multifamily, so you can kind of just have one zoning, but have multiple types of housing. And this one is just missing that density standard.
What was it originally at 9, 9, or 21?
It was 12.5.
Yeah, I think we made MF1 6 units per acre and MF2 8 units per acre. So it should-
Yes.
So it should probably be something in that range.
I would imagine 6 to 8 would be appropriate.
So I mean, if MF2 is the more dense, right?
Correct.
So SF4, you would think maybe we just put it at 6 to match MF1. That makes sense. That's the next,
Next down.
that's the MF1 number.
I would encourage a higher, maybe the 8, because the SF4 is meant to be a
Or like a
traditional.
blend of.
It is,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
instead of, the RC zoning is kind of limited in a way to areas around, that contiguous housing fabric that we have. So the SF4 is kind of meant to emulate a downtown feel where it does have kind of those different housing styles and a higher density. So like, for example, the Bagley property wanted to utilize SF4 zoning. Granted, they only wanted to do one kind of housing, but if you wanted to kind of make a mini downtown, I guess, that would be the zoning that you would utilize. So allowing for that, I think would be more appropriate to have it a little
Okay,
bit
so
denser.
creating a mini downtown, in my way of thinking, means that there is also a commercial element.
Okay, I take that back. Sorry, a mini urban housing fabric. So like Broadway. That's kind of our historic fabric of downtown.
What's the density in Broadway?
I don't know.
Well, there's no multifamily on Broadway.
There isn't. were a couple.
There's some over on Madison. Some apartment buildings.
Okay.
I mean, MF is, they're basically apartment buildings, right? Essentially.
The ones on Madison?
I mean, in
Yes,
general.
Mhm.
The MF.
yes. So I would just encourage something a little heavier, just to kind of give that flexibility in use and housing stock style.
Is heavier an advantage for the community? Or is it heavier as an advantage only to the developer?
I would say both, because we don't have multifamily housing stock available, so a lot of people can't afford to live here, buy a house, build a house, and they need places to live so that they can.
But we've already
Utilize.
approved some to the west of the town, correct?
Multifamily?
I thought it was multifamily going in behind the commercial development on 38. As we
Oh,
layer
on the
back.
Kulkarni property.
Right,
Absolutely.
We zoned it. I mean, yeah,
It's
we
already
zoned it,
approved.
but
Nobody's built.
Nobody's built.
okay.
What density do you want to put it?
I like the 8. Stay with the 8.
I like the 6.
I think that
Andrew,
Two
what are your
units.
thoughts?
I would tend to be on the higher end, so I would be okay with 6, but I think I like 8.
Eight's good then?
You can't keep it closer.
That'll kick you back. So.
Okay,
7.
no. No. Okay, so the last two
You
things,
can always ask for a variance, and if it was one way or another.
well, they would probably ask for, yeah, when it
Bill
comes to
110.
rezoning, they
We
would ask
have
for
the
a
power
higher.
to say no. I mean, that's just it. They
Right.
ask.
The power you have is in your rezones, and I think Pendleton is lucky that, or, planned, I guess, that a lot of their property, when we went through the zone map update, that wasn't being utilized, it's now ag land, so it has to go through something for rezoning, so. So the next two things I have for you, if you want to follow along with the exterior building finish, yes.
What's the maximum height that we're allowing on multifamily apartments?
MF1 or MF2?
Both?
I don't have it in front of me.
Does it accommodate 3 stories? Or 4 or not?
I want to say the max height is probably.
I don't think
35.
so. I think.
The 25?
No, it's not 25. I know it's higher than that. But it's in our UDO.
Does that accommodate a 2-story dwelling, a 3-story or a 4-story?
MF one's 40 for multifamily. 40 feet in MF one, MF two. SF four. The maximum height in RC is whatever the existing height is.
Right.
And in SF four, it's 40 feet for multifamily and 30 feet for single and 2 family.
What's MF2
40.
as well? Okay.
I
So
thought
that's
it had to do
3
with the fire department. What the word is it?
Well, that is,
Maybe
man,
that's-
they
maybe
want
that's
an aerial
true.
truck, but that's $9.
And I know if you go above a certain stories, at least in apartment buildings, they have to be built to a different standard for structural. So the floors have to be a different material or built.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is, I hear density, density, density all the time, that we want higher density developments. And I'm seeing a lot of 3- and 4-story apartment and condos being built in other communities. And I didn't know whether we accommodated that with our current standards. Because I guess going vertical may have its advantages.
Yeah, but it would still have to have a proper amount of land for per unit, the amount of space that's required. So if our standards only allow, sure, you can do 3 stories, but you can only have 6 units in it, whereas another place might double that, 3 stories and 12 units. Okay, so The exterior building finish materials, this is kind of some of those architecture standards that we had kind of mentioned with the I-69 plan stuff. It was brought up that maybe we should assess some of these things. Again, I'm kind of the opinion that we don't have enough built yet to really judge, but I wanted to bring it before you guys. If there was anything on there missing, anything you want taken off, if there's something that, you know, I just kind of noticed the drive it issue, but if there was anything else with that, you will kind of have some homework this evening. So this is kind of just open discussion for this in particular. I'm not looking to move any direction on it and one way or the other. And so,
So DB has no approved materials.
well, I don't have it printed on the next page, but it
Oh.
says anything the administrator deems as a mix of materials or something along those lines. I would say since this is a prohibited material list, it's probably a lot more, I mean, it is a lot more stringent for DB because it is the historic downtown, but
Why does it say prohibited material when it's either indicated in the chart prohibited or acceptable or allowed?
I can change the title if it's
I guess
misleading.
I was confused. Was anyone else?
It is a
confused?
little misleading on
It says
that.
prohibited material, but then you could come over here and all the green areas are
It
allowed.
should
Yeah.
just say material.
Exterior building finished
Acceptable
materials
material.
table.
I mean, this title that says prohibited material should just say material, but these are materials,
Sure,
whether they're prohibited or not, it's up to the chart.
I can do that. I will add that to our amendment list to change the title of table 3.2 to materials. Or exterior materials, I guess, because it's not interior stuff.
We want vinyl siding on there.
I had brought this up with the consultant who created the UDO for the town. And she said that eliminating vinyl siding as a whole could be prohibitive in some way, shape, or form. And also that if we were concerned with vinyl, perhaps doing a percentage would be a better way to go about it instead of outright.
What if we put an asterisk next to that and say must be approved for each use, or must be approved?
Like during the rezone or,
We've gone through with all the developers on single family developments, the fact that we're not going to allow
That's why I
vinyl
asked.
siding.
Well, so if somebody buys 80 acres and wants to build a vinyl house, they're not allowed to.
Says it's acceptable.
I mean, if you prohibit it. This, if you're going through the major subdivision process, then that's the time to address. I mean, this is talking about like single infill
right,
housing.
right. If you
covered
buy
everything.
10 acres and want to build a home, you know, out by where you live.
Yeah.
It would that would prohibit vinyl. So maybe that's kind of what the consultant was meaning, as well as maybe the asterisk says something about major subdivisions, if that's something.
I'd
to
like to see an
consider.
asterisk on there to some point, because like Brad said, we fought every one of them. We won. So far.
Let me do some kind of looking at,
Massage that a little bit.
yeah, massage that a little bit
Yeah.
before we move to actually
Right.
amend it.
Just as I look at this, I think we have opened the gateway for them to argue that you're allowing vinyl siding for individual homes throughout the community, which, you know,
I can't.
why can't I have the same community standards that you're allowing for everyone else?
Mhm.
And we fought it. If you look at the Fishers developments with all the vinyl
Mhm.
coming off the buildings, the waviness, the look it creates with the quality of construction.
Mhm.
You know, we fought it. So do we, I don't think we open the door again for someone to make an argument that
We need an asterisk on it that says upon approval must be approved, especially use something.
Are there any other materials like that? Got a lot of allowance.
molded plastic. What's the difference between molded plastic and vinyl?
It's probably in the definition. Is that?
There's a product called Five
No.
Pond.
That's something else I think with, I wrote on here, redo this table to make it a bit clearer graphically. So if that means kind of what I did with the signs section in the definitions, if that's something you want me to add to either this section or the definitions section, so there's clear,
Yeah, there needs to be more clarity with what
You
that
know,
material.
some of these are, and I don't know what's the difference between molded plastic and a vinyl. I don't know.
There's a product called Phypon. And a lot of times, if it's a vinyl facade, normally they'll run it right up to the windows. Some of them will trim that window out with like a 1x4 or 1x6, as we noted, which was a wood board. Phypon is a molded plastic that looks just like a 1x4. It's got wood texture on it, okay, but it is plastic. And most of it
So it's
is
impervious to rot.
correct. And it's light, it's cheaper, it doesn't warp, it's
Okay.
easier to work with than wood, and when they put it up there, they don't paint it. That's another thing they look at.
It's pre-finished white.
It's a step, they don't have to go back and paint it later on.
Standing seam metal panels. Is that pole barn material?
Pole
That's what
barn
I
goes
said.
across the street, screwed down. Standing seam is no exposed fasteners.
It's like the steel roof that has the vertical fins on it.
This one, this vertical here, this one goes over on top, they lock.
So there's no joint or no
There's a
screw
fastener on
showing.
this side that's hidden. You screw that plate down, this panel comes over, snaps over top of it, and locks, so there's no screws, you don't see any screws like you do across the street.
That steel panel is not only standing seam metal, so standard Menards metal is not prohibited,
Right, and it could be the other way around.
so you can put it anywhere. Basically.
You need to approve standing seam, because it's the high end. It's double and triple what barn metal is.
So why would it be prohibited? I mean,
I think there's maybe some confusion with whoever developed the table on what that means.
Yeah, we need, standing seam should be the high end on the approval.
So what's the other column?
Well, it's either exposed fastener or barn metal. That's exposed fastener.
So exposed fastener steel siding needs to be added. to the
Yeah.
table.
So, okay, so exposed.
What
You know-
about for outbuildings?
I mean, you can
Well,
allow
this
it-
is-
allowed in ag, I guess.
These are, if you look at this table, what I gather from it is that this is for primary structures and especially speaks to the front facade that's street facing. There's kind of, again, I didn't print it out, it's on the previous page, but maybe again, massaging this so it's a little clearer. Like if we're looking at a industrious structure, I hate to bring up LKQ, but the sides and rear of their building are not going to have the same type of architectural amenities as the front. So maybe making that clear if that's what this table is speaking to. So yeah, it's not completely cost prohibitive to build a large office structure or industrious building, etc. So I think what would be good, again, I said, y'all will have some homework, is maybe going through this, adding things you think of, and we can I can take all that feedback and kind of make another table, and then we can kind of look at it from there. And maybe when Jenny and Cheryl return as well, that might be good, but yeah, at least for tonight, we can kind of go through if there's anything like the vinyl, where it's like, why is that on? Or something. And obviously, this is not going to be a comprehensive list, no matter how much we massage it. But if there's things that really are kind of like that standing seam metal, that should be the prohibited for the exposed fastener style, not necessarily the hidden fastener style. So things like that. But I think we could, been wanting to look at this table for a while because it is a bit confusing.
Point of clarification for me. Faced tilt-up panels. Tilt-up panels are those preformed concrete panels.
Like warehouses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have
Kyle
both
explained
text-
that to me the
We have
other day.
untextured, smooth, textured, and adorned.
Yeah, so they have
Okay.
ones that are just plain concrete, some that have some kind of pattern stain.
A line, not have a line or square.
Yeah,
I think
so we will,
Just drive down
New-
Mount Comfort Road, you'll see all kinds of.
so we're prohibiting the smooth, but we'll accept textured or adored.
In certain zones, yeah.
So you can build a plain tilt-up panel house. And that's that one. I would say that the textured or adorned are nicer, so I think that's why they're allowing one.
what's the NTN? NTN has a pattern on their building. So does the freezer. What's the other cool, the food place,
The ice cream
Interstate-
place?
Interstate.
interstate warehousing has a. They got a pattern or a line that goes through there. Usually they put that line in there. They've got like white, it's a two-tone. One side's blue, one side's white or whatever they paint it. They're banded collar.
I think the school corporate office is still concrete.
The front's brick, the back might be tilted up.
I think it's all. I think because when we bought that building, the other plans were there to duplicate it. It's a nice looking building.
Yeah, you could have brick, faux brick tilt-up.
But
panels.
they make it look like brick too.
So,
So there's some tweaking to be done. here.
yeah, there's.
So I guess our homework is to maybe think about other materials
Mhm.
that may or may not need to be.
Yes, and what we have now, if you think there are other, should they be allowable in certain zones where they're currently prohibited and vice versa? Kind of putting that together and, this page, if you want, I can kind of just send out a blank copy to everyone, if that helps. And then have some extra columns at the bottom where you can fill in.
So for instance, say you're gonna build a multifamily building
Mhm.
in SF4,
Okay,
you're allowed to use standing seam metal panels. But to build the same structure in MF1, you're not allowed to use standing seam metal. So how?
Yeah, so that needs to be changed. Standing seam is the high end for anything.
Well, I'm just saying, for MF1 and 2, you have areas that are prohibited.
yeah,
Untextured tilt-up panels, smooth face concrete blocks, stucco drive it. But if you build the same building in SF4 zoning, then now you're allowed to
correct.
use those less desirable materials.
And I,
But
Again-
you'd think the SF4 would be a more restrictive zone,
yes, because it has.
so.
Yeah. I do not know either. Again, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. This was all, I think, as is when you guys passed it when I first got here. So it hasn't caused an issue yet, again, but
you know, there's
Kind
a lot
of some-
contradictory.
there's some contradictory info, and moving forward, I think this is a good place to start, where instead of just starting over with our architecture standards, because as we talked about earlier, we don't really have a good pool to judge yet, but at least these materials being prohibited or allowed kind of might be a good step in the right direction with that.
So
So,
to make sure I understand it, in all of our single family classifications, SF1 through SF4, we will allow smooth faced concrete block structures. We will allow split faced or burnished concrete block. Untextured smooth panel, tilt up panels for homes, or textured. Standing metal seam. And molded plastic.
yes. Yes, we do.
So-
Anything with the
Very
green A.
interesting homes.
So we've got some work to do, if that's not what we want to reflect.
Well, the one historical note is there are some US steel homes that were prefabricated and built probably in the
Like Levittown, right?
40s or 50s. There are several of them up in Anderson that probably have historic mid-century designations, but they were prefab steel homes.
All right, last thing I have for you, promise. Conservation subdivisions. So, this kind of came, back into my head when the Bagley property went for a conservation subdivision. Again, it's sometimes hard to use these tools in the UDO unless we have something that wants to be built, just because of how extensive that document is. So our current conservation residential subdivision. So Steph, if you wouldn't mind putting up, I put a folder for conservation style subdivisions.
This is like really slow.
Oh, is it? Okay, all right. Well, I'll do my best to just explain it off the cuff. But essentially it means that, I'm a developer, I buy 100 acres and I want to put 100 houses. That's a typical subdivision. They're acre lots apiece, et cetera, et cetera. A conservation style subdivision takes those 100 houses and puts them into 50 acres. You know what I mean? So it's conserving at least half of the property for open space, nature space. This one should work. If
There's a
you can
couple side by sides where. it kinda
Yes, there
really
is.
spells it
If
out.
you scroll through, it kind of has a really good visual that shows you.
Yeah, that's a decent one.
That one's- This is a really fuzzy one.
It might be the other, one of the other. files
Yeah, if we
is
can go
better.
back, I think it's the first one that's in that folder, if I'm not mistaken.
Use the other back button by the PDF.
But essentially, it's there to conserve the open space if there's a natural feature. Okay, so it is, try the first one. Yeah, second page. Perfect. So you see here, this is that standard 100 acres, 1 acre lots, 100 houses. Now, if you condense everything down to where there's smaller lots, denser cluster style housing, it conserves the rest of the open space. It is usually transferred to a land trust, or it's donated in some way where it always stays green space. It always stays nature space. So we have this written out. It's okay, but it's not very strong. So we mentioned in the intent density incentives. We do not have any density incentives right now for conservation style subdivision, because we reference the max gross density from major residential subdivision. It's supposed to have its own set, and also the open space references table 5.3, which is again that major residential style. So everything that I have found says minimum open space, regardless of the lot sizes. I mean, they are going to be considerably smaller, is at least 50%. Right now the Bagley property was a great example. They were going to go with the 7,000 square foot lots, and they only needed 30%, maybe.
Well, I think that property, most of it was, the way it was laid out, couldn't be developed. So they went for that so they could get 7,000 square foot lots. So that was.
Right.
That, they weren't doing it to be nice.
They were forced into it.
They just so happened to get
So I-
lucky
I
that
looked
they're.
up a few. I looked up Fishers and I looked up Zionsville.
Mhm.
And both of their UDOs, you establish a baseline density based on what you could fit under the standard zoning.
Mhm.
And
Okay,
that is your maximum density. And your incentive is because you can put in half as much infrastructure by packing it all into one side with
Yeah.
smaller lots.
Yeah.
So the incentive isn't I can get an extra 20 lots.
yeah,
It's that I can get the same number of lots and spend
Right.
less building those lots. So I don't know that I think we should remove that the purpose is to provide density incentives. I think
okay,
we need to reword that,
Could
it's
you
an
make-
it's an incentive for, more,
Green
clustered
space.
more
infrastructure,
green space, more
Trails.
consolidated infrastructure.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, public space, something like that. And I think we should, modeling those other communities, you use the traditional SF, whatever your zoning is,
Right.
your lot width and your square footage to establish your base density.
where, you said Noblesville
I don't
and,
know, it was Fishers and Zionsville were two that
Okay, in Zionsville. Yeah, because I was looking at that and I was like, well,
'Cause
we
I-
don't have any
Westfield didn't-
incentives, you know,
Westfield didn't have it. Noblesville, I
monetary
couldn't find
wise,
anything.
certainly, you know, we don't have TIF or something like
I
that.
mean, we do have a
incentive
moderately,
wise.
you know, the lot size and the lot width. So Fisher's was like a 20% decrease in lot area
Mhm,
and some decrease in lot width and setbacks.
yeah,
So I think we should probably have a stronger incentive. You know,
That-
reduce that
yeah.
lot size down, something smaller,
yeah,
and maybe reduce the setbacks a little. That seems to be what they were doing.
yeah. So maybe, you know, putting density incentives such as, you know, not
Well, it's not, yeah, it's not just I can get more lots on X acres.
correct. Yeah, it's, and I think that's good too, because all of the things I have found too have said, we're not taking and trying to add more.
Yeah,
It's
I counted
100
some of these
here.
and it looked like they were the same. X number of lots, X number of lots.
Yeah, and that's the point of it. Instead of 100 1-acre lots, you have 100 half-acre
You don't
lots,
just
and
waste all that.
you
ground.
don't waste all the space.
So how do you guarantee that they don't go high density conservation district and then flip that and then do development on the conservation district?
Well, that's the thing with conservation is that you have to dedicate that land to, like, basically to a land trust where it can only ever be open space and it can never be
Who
developed. on.
manages the land trust?
That's on a page I didn't print,
Well, I mean, you can
but
put it in, if you put it in common area, and the HOA maintains it, they can't sell it or subdivide it or build on
there's legal routes that can be
To
had
protect it.
to assure, and I know that our UDO does state that it can be deeded to like nonprofits with the guarantee that it stays as it is, you know, open space kind of stuff. There's a few different options for assuring that it is only ever nature space.
Jeff, are you comfortable that we can protect that?
That's hard to police.
I am. I mean, we'll need to be careful with our verbiage, but yes, I am.
So, and that is kind of a huge portion of this is that that area will always be preserved nature area. So then I guess, you know, Kyle, to your point, then, if you're looking at the max gross density based on the zoning and doing that calculation of, you know, where it
it.
is,
Called a yield plan, that's what they were.
Yeah. how does that work with how much open space? Because again, most of these things are at least 50%. I've seen as low as 33 in the studies that I've looked at, but how does that work with it? You know, like,
I mean, I guess it depends, it may depend on how big of a square footage or width decrease you're gonna give.
mhm,
You know, if like this, it's only right now, it's only a reduction from 7,200 to 7,000.
right.
So you know, that's not a lot of extra space to provide as green space, so I don't know.
Right. So again, it's just kind of some thoughts on this that I had. We do need to do some homework on it, but I think we have a lot of room where we could improve with stuff like that, especially the biggest thing for me was that minimum open space because, you know, our table that we're referring to here, the smallest lot that we have is that 7,000 availability, and it's definitely not 50% open space.
Okay.
So, you know, that's kind of a big chunk of this is that you're preserving as much as possible, but still having,
So
Just-
you want a tiered requirement, or are
I-
you just gonna say 50% for conservation? Is that what?
I kind of think it should be a set number, and then if you exceed that, you know, maybe you get a better density incentive or something.
So you could have like 50% open space, get you this reduction, you go 60%. you get a
Yeah.
Bigger reduction.
Yeah, and it's no more than 70. I know that. That's kind of what I
And
read
you-
too, is that it's 50 to
And you wanna
70.
make sure it's not just floodplain or
Yes.
utility easement, something that you
Right.
can't use.
So
Useful.
what I
Yeah.
did find was as far as now I don't know about like floodway kind of stuff, but anything that's utilized for storm landscaping, drainage, swales, et cetera, cannot exceed 25% of the required open space. So
So
again, we can change that, but that's just what I've found.
We've never approved it. Conservation.
Bagley was.
Technically, the Begley rezone, right? Did they do primary plat?
No, they pulled out of that deal.
Can I bring up a subject here on the septic systems?
Sure.
I thought we were somewhat restrictive for the acreage or lot size for single-family developments outside of Fall Creek Regional Waste that said you had to have X number of acres or square footage to put in a septic system.
It's 5 acres, right?
Now septic, I don't know about. I know with wells, it has to be for just water, minimum 2 acres is the county standard. But as far as,
I think rural residential is the smallest lot that allows septic by the UDO.
The first thing is,
that
Fall
is a
Creek,
good point,
if you're within 300 feet of the road, you're gonna have to serve. It's available.
right? And I'm not sure if this was something that was an issue before we maybe annexed certain parts of town where people did have septic and then, Fall Creek.
What,
allowed them
I
to
guess
put
why I'm
in,
bringing it
but-
up is our UDO is somewhat restricted. I thought it was restricted when we wrote it. Because the Department of Health standards for square footage for a septic system are much smaller than our UDO were. I'm basing that on 2 or 3 other counties I've had experience with.
Well, we could
Just get rid
change
of
that like we do with,
I don't know anywhere you're gonna build a house in the city limits of Pelham and not be able to serve.
right, especially since this isn't a subdivision. I mean, the rezone alone, you have to hook up to Fall
So
Creek.
should we
but-
state that it's a mandatory requirement that the conservation districts connect to Fall Creek, a
Yeah,
certified regional waste facility?
You're right.
I mean, I would imagine so, because if Kyle, if the minimum for a septic is,
The county minimum is 2 acres, I believe. Madison
oh,
County.
it's 2 as
But in
well,
Pendleton, I think it's rural residential is 5.
right? So, with that being said, we could either change this to, it must be hooked up to a Fall Creek Regional Waste. Or another thing I did want to discuss was the districts permitted allows Ag 2 and rural res.
So if you did a rural res conservation subdivision and you gave, say, a 20% lot reduction.
Yeah.
So you could have a 4-acre lot and have a septic, and that would be permitted under rural residential.
Right, because rural res does allow septic and,
So I think this thing about lots served by septic system, we just don't need that.
yeah,
Because you're gonna get, if we do a percentage square footage reduction and you're in rural residential, then you'd be allowed to have a septic system.
well, the other thing is that, in my opinion, I don't think A2 and RR fit what a conservation style subdivision is supposed to entail
Because of the lot size.
because of the lot sizes, whereas.
I mean, if you're subdividing 160 acres or something,
Yeah,
I guess you could do 5-acre lots all on one
right,
side.
but the
It just
thing
doesn't
with,
make as much sense.
it doesn't make much sense when if, for example, like with the septic, that whole thing, requiring it in sanitary sewer hookup in SF1 through SF4, you can have 5-acre SF4 lots. Like the standards we have are minimums, but typically a developer is going to not
But you
go
would
that.
have to have separate
route.
sewer
Correct.
to zone that. way.
So I think just taking out A2 and RR from the districts permitted, we could eliminate that bullet point completely.
So that there would be no references to septic systems meeting
Right, because they
county
would,
health standards.
Yeah.
it would be irrelevant.
Because,
And
because sewer and water is required in all the
in
SFs.
all of the SFs.
Yeah.
So again, if someone says, I want to do SF3 and have a conservation subdivision with 5-acre lots, they can do that as
And
long
they
as
could
it
get, they
meets.
could get a waiver. I mean, in that instance, they could probably get a waiver for this public sewer requirement. For lots that large. Because there's a requirement for sewer. If they're in an area that doesn't have sewer,
Mhm.
then they could potentially get a waiver.
It'd probably cheaper for them to run a sewer and look up Fall Creek Waste, all of them would be.
Well, I mean,
I'm
if they
just-
have 10 lots, then maybe not, depending on where they're at.
I'm just thinking like realistically, is anyone ever gonna try to do something that big on that much land where they would want to have
Not in a
septic.
conservation.
In the
In a
conservation.
standard subdivision with
Yeah.
5 acre lots, sure.
Sure, yeah,
But you're not gonna do a cluster.
Chad Lucan's on 150 for the White Mansion. 150 and 36
Carries, yeah.
I don't know that property.
east, just east of town on 36. Great big white house.
I don't leave town much.
Wow.
I don't. Everything I
about-
need is here,
Well,
so.
They bought 100 acres and subdivided. it.
There are like 8 lots right on 150,
Uh-huh,
and they come to Fall Creek about sewer.
yeah,
They were far enough back off the road, they could have went septic,
mhm,
decided not. to.
right, because they're
Well,
so
you got-
far back.
You guys have a force main.
We
36.
ran a whole new line down through there. for 'em. You know what the cost of septic and everything else.
Yeah, I guess just in this kind of subdivision in particular, it would just be, kind of defeat the purpose.
Yeah.
If you were trying to, not have everything clustered and close where you would indeed put in or connect to.
That dense, you probably run into well trouble. Probably could get the well, far enough away.
Yeah, I think
Certain
let's
counties
just
it's
take
50
A2 and
feet.
RR out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just-
Property line.
50 feet from a septic field.
Oh, she's like, I doubt you could get it
Well,
all in
they
there.
didn't run the water after that, did they?
No, they got forced main sewer.
Yeah, but no water. Yeah, I think it makes sense to just strike A2 and RR out of the permitted districts.
yeah, and that
And it's
bullet
reference
points
to septic.
as well. Okay. All right, so I
So I
will,
guess we'll need to do some homework on what the incentives look like. and
Yes.
Make
yes,
them,
Incentives.
developers want to do it, because these
Right.
would be preferred to a standard subdivision.
right. And I think, the Begley property is a good example, but there are plenty of other properties that have those existing natural features and topography and connections where we want to be able to try to encourage preserving that. And also, especially as you go further out, bigger lots. It might be less infrastructure as well, so. So that's kind of just my thoughts on that one. If it's agreeable with the board, I will amend the table 5.6 right now to remove A2 and RR, as well as the bullet point speaking to septic systems. If that's okay with everyone, just in the meantime, and then we'll kind of go back and revisit this and make it a little bit stronger.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Andrew, are you okay with
Yep.
that?
Yep, I agree.
Okay. And then the next thing I will do is work on this table. I'll get you a blank copy. And I will amend the table 3.2, excuse me, right now to change, just right now in the meantime, to change the title from prohibited material to exterior materials. That's okay with everyone. Good, okay. Andrew, are you okay with that?
Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna change it here and down here where it says prohibit the word prohibited.
Yes. Okay. I will change both. Anything that says prohibited materials. Okay, so Jeff, do we need to do a roll call vote to approve the amendments as discussed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
I'll make a
Oh,
motion.
yes, I believe so.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendments to the submitted UDO graphs and tables as we discussed tonight, with the following recommendations as noted. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. We have a roll call vote, please. Hannah?
Brad Valentine,
Yes,
Kyle Acorn,
Yes.
Tim Pritchard,
Yes.
Carol Hannah,
Yes.
Andrew Holloway.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything else, I don't have anything for you. Anything else for you?
Andrew, you have any comments?
Nope, I'm good to go.
Brad?
All right, thank you, everyone.
I'm good.
Thank you. Have a great night, guys.
Adjourned. Thank you, Jeff.